Hello my dear children, Namaste and welcome to yet another session of our Class 10 Biology ICSE series. I am Ambika, Master Teacher of Biology right here at Vedantu, and you know that we have been progressing well with the chapter Genetics, some basic fundamentals. I've been getting some amazing response from all of you. We are done with the basics about Mendel's experiments, and as you know, we have already done like the basics of the part Sex-linked inheritance in humans in our previous session, right? So as I keep telling you, this is a slightly concept heavy chapter, but the good news for all of you, regardless of whether you are a fan of biology or you don't like biology, whatever it is, the good news for you is that as long as you are thorough with the basic concepts, you will not have to memorize anything more. It's my word, because you can apply a lot of logic, and once you are familiar with the method of answering the questions from this chapter, all those marks are completely yours. So stay with me till the end. We are going to be discussing another very important part of this chapter, which is all about inheritance patterns of X-linked traits, which is what you have in your syllabus. And yes, we know that we are nearing the end of October and your motivation has to be very much on the higher side. So just like every other session, this is what I want to start today's session with. Study hard, no matter if it seems impossible, no matter if it takes time, no matter if you have to put up all night. Just remember that the feeling of success is the best thing in the entire world. Wow, that's actually beautiful if you ask me. Just imagine that feeling of success. Just visualize yourself, close your eyes for a moment, visualize yourself with your board exam results that you have got like high marks, and then imagine that smile on your face, your family's face and all your loved ones' faces. And yes, right after that moment, you would certainly have developed the deep desire to succeed. And then, of course, like we always say, keep working hard. Your motivation will certainly stay on the higher side, right? And yes, before anything else, if you have not downloaded Vedantu's learning app yet, do remember to download it now. Do stay in touch with us through the Telegram group, and most importantly, if you have been enjoying all these sessions, if you have been finding these useful, do remember to hit the like button, because we don't really get to see each other face to face on a regular basis or anything like that, right? So how you can show your interest and your love for us, for the entire team here that's working hard for you, is by hitting the like button. Do share it with all your friends so that they also benefit from all our sessions. And if you have not subscribed to our channel yet, especially ICSE children, because until now we have been focusing more on CBSE, but starting with October, the first week of October, we have started focusing a lot on you ICSE children also. So just in case you have not subscribed to our channel Vedantu 9th and 10th yet, do hit the subscribe button right now so that you can be sure about not missing out on any of our amazing sessions coming up even in the days and weeks to come. Okay, now let us look at the homework question that we had yesterday. If a gene is present only on the Y chromosome, can both sons and daughters inherit it from their father? Explain your answer. I did get a lot of people who gave me the correct answer. I think in fact whoever answered this has only given me the correct answer this time. And yes, all of you have done a good job. Ayush Sharma, Siddhi Sharma, Isha, and yes, I got another email with a handwritten answer from Hasini. Thank you very much, Hasini, for taking the time and effort for this. Thank you very much, all three of you, and great job, because what you have explained is correct. Everyone has explained it well enough, and yes, everyone has explained the same things. I'll just read one of them randomly. Only the son can inherit it from his father, not the daughter. This is because the gene is present on Y chromosome, and the daughter inherits only X chromosomes from her father and not the Y chromosome. On the other hand, the son would inherit it because the son inherits Y chromosome from his father. Hope I'm right. Yes, Ayush, you are completely right. A son, a boy, or a male human always gets only his Y chromosome from his dad. He gets his X chromosome always from his mom. So this answer completely makes sense. Everyone else here, Siddhi, Isha and Hasini, all of them have given me the same answer. Keep it up, guys. So we will also again have another question at the end of this session. That will be more of a problem-based question, but you will not be able to answer it without understanding what I'm going to teach you in today's session. Okay, so stay alert, children. Pay complete attention for the next 40-45 minutes. Completely stay with me. This is very important because the next few minutes that you spend with me, I'm sure will be worth your time, so that you don't have to spend hours trying to understand this complex topic anytime you sit down to study it by yourself. Just spend the time with me right now and you will, I guarantee you, you will understand most of it, if not all of it. Okay, if there is any further doubt, of course, as I always say, you can be in touch with me. So let us start with a quick recap of the previous session. How many autosomes does a normal human diploid cell contain? I've been asking you this a lot of times in many different kinds of questions, in many different wordings. I'm sure you all know the answer now. And yes, the answer is 44 autosomes. In total, a human diploid cell contains 46 chromosomes, out of which 44 are autosomes and 2 are sex chromosomes, either X or Y chromosomes. Okay, going on to the next one. Hemophilia. This is from our session yesterday. Hemophilia is an example of autosomal inheritance, X-linked inheritance, Y-linked inheritance, or both B and C. Let's see how many of you remember what I taught you in yesterday's session. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And the answer is X-linked inheritance. Okay, it's not B and C because hemophilia is always, the gene for hemophilia is present on the X chromosome and not on the Y chromosome. Okay, we have one last question. Which of these decides the sex of a human baby? Hormones, egg, sperm, B and C. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, and the answer is sperm. This is because if you recall, the egg or the female gamete always contains the X chromosome. The male gamete or the sperm could contain either the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. So there is completely 50-50 chance, okay, 50-50 probability of having or fertilizing it and developing it into a girl baby or a boy baby. So what decides it? It is the sex chromosome found in the sperm that decides the sex of the baby. Okay, so let us come back to our session for today. We have discussed a lot about genetic traits in our previous session. Let us also connect it with the types of chromosomes that we know about, which are autosomes and sex chromosomes, right? So that's what I've written here. Depending on whether the gene for a trait is present on autosomes or the sex chromosomes, we categorize genetic traits into autosomal traits and sex-linked traits. Okay, so just like any other genetic trait, keep this in mind. Autosomal and sex-linked, both of them could either be dominant or recessive in nature. Okay, I hope by now you have got a clear picture about what dominant traits are and what recessive traits are. Okay, so if you are still not thorough with it, go back to our basics on Mendel's experiments, make it pakka, and then come back and watch this session. It will be much more easy for you to understand. Okay, now sex-linked, again, we have discussed that human sex chromosomes can either be the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. correct? So based on that, depending on whether the gene is present on the X chromosome or on the Y chromosome, sex-linked traits could either be X-linked or Y-linked. Okay, now Y-linked is not really focused in your syllabus, and again it's present only in males. So generally it is a little less studied because the more common cases around the world are the X-linked traits, because both males and females have X chromosomes. So X-linked traits are found in both the genders, both the sexes, because of which we study X-linked inheritance more in detail. Now again, X-linked inheritance could either be dominant or recessive, right? So have a look at that, just understand it before we go ahead. And the main category of genetic traits among these that we have mentioned, which your syllabus, your ICSE syllabus is focused on, are the X-linked recessive traits. The examples for which we have seen in the previous session, hemophilia and color blindness. Remember, both of them are X-linked recessive traits. Right. Now going forward, this is why, like I said, we call traits sex-linked traits or autosomal traits. Traits whose genes are found on the sex chromosomes, either the X chromosome or the Y chromosome, are described as sex-linked traits, and their inheritance pattern is what we call sex-linked inheritance. We've seen this yesterday, right, with both these examples. Now, again, how do we find out if a trait runs in a family? Now, sometimes you must have heard of cases where people talk a lot about genetic history, regardless of whether they understand biology or not. In general, you must have heard elders in your family or people in your family in general saying, diabetes runs in my family, so I need to be careful and cautious. Right? So even if you go to a doctor, not now, at least now you're around 15 years of age. Once you reach about 20, 25 years of age and you go to a doctor related to some health issue or something like that, they may ask you questions such as, do you have a family history of diabetes? Do you have a family history of blood pressure or high BP? And so on. What do we mean by that? How do we find out if a trait runs in a family? Now, externally, as common man, if you just look at it, if you know cases where your family members have reported that they have diabetes or blood pressure, you would know it. That's all that common man can do. But apart from that, there is a very, very logical method that geneticists normally use to find out if a trait runs in a family. Now, why do we have to find out if it runs in the family? This especially comes in as a handy tool at the time of genetic counseling. Say, for instance, a couple is married and they are planning to have a child. And if there is some kind of genetic disease running in either of their families or in both of their families, some kind of abnormality that generations have had, they might want to seek the advice of a genetic counselor. Right? And then the counselor can tell them, based on their family history, what is the probability that their child, a son or a daughter, whatever child they may have, what is the probability that their child can also get the disease? And then they can proceed accordingly, right? So how does a geneticist or how does a genetic counselor find this out? Based on family history. That is what we are going to find out now, but not in high complexity. We will see how it is basically done. This method is called pedigree analysis. Now, the word pedigree, some of you may be familiar with it from the dog food pedigree that's available in the market. Yes, that is also called pedigree, but in general, the term pedigree is used to refer to lineage or family history. So pedigree analysis, it's basically understanding the family tree. This is just an example that I've put here: brown hair, blonde hair, and this is like the mom and dad, these are their children, and the daughter's husband and their children, and all of these things. We do have specific sets of symbols that we use to create a pedigree chart. Anyway, but what I feel is that this example I just put here for your understanding, but most of the time it's not about, people are curious not about understanding about the skin color or hair color or anything like that. The concern mostly comes when thinking about the inheritance of diseases, genetically inherited diseases, right? So that will be an example that we are going to be considering today. What is a pedigree chart? A pedigree chart is a chart that displays a family tree and shows the members of the family who are affected by a genetic trait. Either who are affected by, I use the word affected by because, as I said, people are mostly concerned about genetic diseases more than any random trait. So it can either be affected by a genetic trait or express a genetic trait. That is what a pedigree chart is. This is an example of a miniature pedigree chart. Now, these are the symbols that we commonly use in a pedigree chart. Okay, there are symbols for each case, for normal people, for affected people, for people who are somewhere in the middle. I will be telling you what they are. As you can see, squares represent males, a man, circles represent females, and a line connecting a man and a woman, or a square and a circle, would indicate mating or marriage. Okay, and if we want to talk about children born to this particular couple, we draw a line in the middle and that bifurcates, and then suppose, for example, they have a son and a daughter. This is how you would represent it. Obviously, if they have only one child, it would be just one of them branching out from the parents. And if it's going to be two girls, it will be two circles. If it's two boys, it will be two squares, and so on. Okay, and then dizygotic twins, monozygotic twins, we have cases for all of these. Dizygotic twins, basically we are talking about fraternal twins, twins who are not exactly identical to each other. Usually that's the case of a boy and a girl. Twins who are twins, a pair of twins that consists of a boy and a girl. That is what we mean by dizygotic twins or fraternal twins. There are also cases of both girls and both boys. Why do we use the terms dizygotic and monozygotic? This is because dizygotic twins, pay attention children, not related to the concept for today, but for your understanding, dizygotic twins are those that develop from two different zygotes. We will be discussing more of these in the chapter Human Reproduction. Monozygotic twins are those that develop from one single zygote. Say for instance, in this case, two zygotes are initially formed and each of these zygotes independently develops into an individual fetus and an individual baby. In this case, a single zygote is initially formed and later that splits into two, which basically means that the genetic composition for monozygotic or identical twins would be completely the same as each other's. Okay, that is what we mean by the terms monozygotic and dizygotic. Now this is a symbol used to indicate the number of children, 3 or for 3 girls, 4 boys, and so on. We also have some additional symbols like affected individuals. Yes, this is very important to know. Affected individuals, if we are talking about a particular disease by which certain individuals in the family have been affected, we use shaded squares for the affected males and shaded circles for the affected females. And why do we also have half shaded circles and squares? This is especially for heterozygotes. what I mean is we are talking about a condition wherein somebody, especially for recessive cases, remember, for a recessive trait to be expressed, an individual would need to have 2 copies of the recessive allele. Okay? But in the case of a heterozygote, an individual would have 1 copy of the dominant allele and 1 copy of the recessive allele. That is what this is, especially in the case of a recessively inherited disease, right? Such individuals are called carrier individuals or carriers. Okay? Now, carrier of sex-linked recessive traits may be represented this way. Now, this is optional. What I mean is that there are also pedigree charts in which, regardless of whether it's autosomal or sex-linked, carriers are always represented by half-shaded squares or circles. This is not very commonly used. I've just put it here for your understanding. If someone in the family has passed away, you represent them like this. If it's a man who has passed away, is no more alive, you just strike them off with a slanting line. And then spontaneous abortion for a triangle, consanguineous marriage. What do we mean by that? Especially in India. India is a country where many states, many parts of the country, we still have families in which closely related cousins get married to each other. In South India, at least, it is common in some parts wherein girls may marry their maternal uncle, or in some parts of India, children of siblings. What I mean is, there is a brother and a sister, and the brother's son or a brother's daughter and his sister's son or sister's daughter may get married to each other. So consanguineous marriage is marriage between closely related family members, and that is important to represent in a pedigree chart because such marriages can result in a lot of additional genetic abnormalities as compared to completely unrelated individuals getting married. Okay, this is why there is a symbol exclusively for that. If the sex is being unknown, you represent it as a diamond shaped symbol or a rhomboid shaped symbol. Okay, so I know there are too many symbols to remember, but for now, for your level of understanding, remember a few symbols which I'm going to be telling you now. Pay attention, children. You must know the symbol for male. Okay, you must know the symbol for female. The next important one is mating or marriage. This one. Okay, and the next one is parents and children. These 4 are very, very important, and we have 2 more that are important, which will be affected individuals, completely shaded, and heterozygous individuals or carrier individuals, represented by half-shaded squares or circles respectively. So 6 of them that I'll highlight here for you. These are the main symbols that you have to know to proceed further in pedigree analysis and to understand sex-linked inheritance. Okay, just have a look for a couple of seconds and we'll go ahead to the next slide. Okay, children? Now, like I said, genetic traits can either be autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive, or they can be X-linked dominant or X-linked recessive, or they can be Y-linked. And we are concerned about X-linked recessive disorders for the time being. Okay, I think I told you this yesterday in the previous session that a well-known case of hemophilia across the world has been the case of the royal family of England, which is Queen Victoria's family in England. The story says that Queen Victoria's ancestors did not have the disease at all, but because of some mutation, Queen Victoria happened to be a carrier of the disease, hemophilia. Okay? And because she was a carrier and not an affected individual, remember, individuals can either be normal, carriers, or affected, especially in the case of a recessive trait, right? So since she was a carrier, she physically did not have any symptoms, right? Queen Victoria was physically fine, but in her genes, she was carrying the allele for hemophilia. And she was married, and then their children, some of their children ended up being affected. Some of them were carriers, some of them were normal. So this is basically a rough pedigree chart that shows Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's children, and then their children, and so on. So this has been running in the royal family for quite some time now. You can see that the affected males here are represented by the purple shaded squares. Unaffected males like Prince Albert are normal white squares. Normal female is a white circle, and carrier females are half shaded circles. Now, have you noticed one thing? We are not representing affected females in this pedigree chart. Any idea why this could be the case? And we don't have carrier males in this particular pedigree chart. If you look at these 4 symbols here, any idea why that could be the case? Well, yes, let us go ahead and discuss this. What the possibilities can be. Possible genotypes related to X-linked recessive inheritance. Now, as I told you, an individual with an X-linked recessive trait could either be normal, okay, or a carrier, or be affected. We are specifically talking about hemophilia. Color blindness is also inherited exactly in the same pattern. For now, since we are still in Queen Victoria's story, let's talk about hemophilia. Okay, a normal female, let's talk about females and males. A normal female would have her genotype as this. Let us represent a carrier female like this. This means that she is heterozygous or carries one allele for hemophilia. I would like to represent that allele this way. X with a superscript small h. Why do I pick small h and not capital H? Because I want to just emphasize on the fact that it is a recessive trait and not a dominant trait. So because it's XHX, this means that this individual is only a carrier and not affected. What about an affected female? Her genotype could be, not could be, it will be this. Okay, this is the case of our female individuals, normal, carrier, affected. What about males? A normal male would certainly be XY. Is it possible that a male can be a carrier? This is my question. An affected male would have this as his genotype. So as you can see, interestingly, because it is an X-linked trait, a man would either be only normal or he is affected. A man cannot be a carrier for an X-linked recessive trait. Basically because, unlike females, a man does not have a complementary X chromosome to mask the effect of the affected allele. If only he had an additional X chromosome here, which could have masked the effect of this affected allele, he would have been normal. But of course, if there are 2 X chromosomes, that means it's a female and not a male, right? So here, this doesn't exist at all. And now, why is it that in our previous chart, we did not represent affected females? Of course, they do have a possibility of having this genotype, but in Queen Victoria's family, we did not have that in the legend here, basically because usually hemophilic females, by which I mean affected females with this genotype, may not survive until the reproductive age. There may be cases, there may be exceptions, but typically they may not survive, they may not live as long as until they reach the reproductive age. Okay, this is why a female is most commonly normal or a carrier woman, and male is always either normal or affected. Okay, get this concept very, very clear in your head so that we can go to the next one. This is just to make you understand this a little better with illustrations, with an outline of a man and a woman, a father without hemophilia. I'll just rewrite the genotypes here so that you can just compare it. Of course, it's there, but not completely in sync with the kind of allele that we have chosen. Father is normal, okay? So his genotype is this. Mother is a carrier for hemophilia gene, because of which her genotype will be this, right? They have, this is a cross between this male and this female. What about their children? We are talking about the different gametic combinations. This is one gamete, this is another gamete. In her case, this is a gamete and this is another gamete. So when they have children, when they mate and have children, these are the possibilities. X, XH, XX, XHY and XY, which means that the daughters, if you look at it, all of them who have two X chromosomes, half of them will be normal, half of them are carriers. And among the sons, 50% are normal and 50% are hemophilic. Right? This is what we are trying to say here, and based on these observations, we can come to a conclusion of listing out a set of features for X-linked recessive traits, which are these. You can see that the gene is transmitted from the mother to son or the father to daughter, because of which we call this crisscross inheritance pattern, because mother to son, son to daughter, or father to daughter and that daughter to her son, because of which it is a crisscross pattern of inheritance if you try to represent it in the form of a pedigree or in the form of a chart. Okay? Remember that name. Now, such traits always skips generations, by which we mean that the character is inherited to the second generation through carriers in the first generation. So in this case, parents are both unaffected. If you look at them externally, they are both unaffected and seem normal. But just because we have a carrier parent in the first generation, there are chances that one of her children is affected by the disease. This is what I mean by this point. Character is inherited to the second generation through carriers in the first generation. Basically meaning that genotypically this disease is skipping generations. Okay? And thirdly, men are either normal or affected. They cannot be carriers. This is something that we have already seen. Okay, so assuming that you have understood all of this completely well, let us go ahead and solve a problem based on this. Like I told you, color blindness inheritance pattern is also exactly the same as hemophilia's inheritance pattern. Okay, keeping that in mind, let's look at this. Find out the progeny of a marriage between a color blind man and a carrier woman. If you get a question like this, what would be your first step? Yes, children, the very first step that you have to do will be guessing the genotypes of the parents. Marriage between a colorblind man and a carrier woman. A colorblind man, I would like to represent him like this, with a superscript C, just like we did a small h for hemophilia, right? Colorblind man. And a carrier woman would have the genotype as this, because one of her X chromosomes is normal, the other X chromosome carries the allele for color blindness. Okay, so now let us look at the possibilities of their children. The gametes of the man would be these two. The gametes of the woman would be this. I think Punnett square works as the most systematic method without confusions to do this. This would be XC, XC. This would be X, XC, this would be XCY, and the last one would be XY. Okay, so how would you explain the answer from this particular Punnett square? Among the daughters, look at all the daughters, which means look at all the children who have 2 X chromosomes. These 2 cases, among the daughters, 50% of them are colorblind with 2 copies of the color blindness allele. 50% of them are carriers. So among the daughters, 50% would be affected or colorblind and 50% are carriers. Among the sons, okay, among the sons, which means all the children who have a Y chromosome, 50% are colorblind and 50% are normal. Like in the case of hemophilia, because the inheritance pattern is the same for color blindness, males can certainly not be carrier individuals. So 50% of them again are colorblind or affected, while the remaining 50% of the sons are normal. Okay, this will be your answer, but of course make sure that you draw a Punnett square very neatly and like very legibly, so that you don't go wrong in your calculations also, and your conclusions have to be written in proper sentences. From the Punnett square above, it is evident that 50% of the daughters would be affected, 50% would be carriers. Among the sons, 50% would be affected and the remaining 50% would be normal. Well, one more question. We have come to a beautiful conclusion and calculation and all of that, but what does this exactly mean? 50% would be affected, 50% carriers, 50% of sons affected and 50% normal. What we mean is that with every pregnancy of this woman, with every expectation of a child of this particular couple, these are the probabilities. The probability that the child that is going to be born, the child that the couple is expecting, if it's a girl, there is a 50% chance that the child will be affected, or a 50% chance that she will be a carrier. If it's a boy, there is a 1/2 or a 50% chance that he will be affected, or a 50% chance of normal. What I'm trying to say is that this probability stays the same with every pregnancy. Every time the couple is expecting a child, this probably remains the same. Just because the first child, say for instance, just because of the first child was affected, doesn't mean they will not have any more children. Oh, I already had the 50% already, so the next one will be a carrier. No, that is not what this means. With each pregnancy, this probability stays the same. There are equal chances that they can have either carrier or affected daughters, or normal or affected sons. Okay, I hope that is very, very clear. It is an important thing to get cleared in your mind. Not every textbook teaches you this particular thing. They would only give you the probabilities. They will not explain what it means. So keep that in mind, children. A very, very important thing. Now, I hope you're in a better position to answer the question with me now. Let us solve this together, okay? I want all of you to have pen and paper in hand and solve this with me. Find out the progeny of a marriage between a hemophilic man and a carrier woman. This will be very similar to that, but I want all of you to try it out with me. A hemophilic man would be this. The carrier woman would be this. It would be pretty much or exactly the same as the previous one, except that the C has been replaced by an H. What are the gamete combinations? The gametes in the case of the male are these. The gametes that the female or the wife would produce would be these. And the Punnett square would have the combinations XH, XH, X, XH, XHY and XY. Okay, now let me look at who's giving me the answer from the Punnett square. Half of your work is done. tell me what you conclude. How many daughters would be hemophilic? Look at only the daughters. What percent of the daughters would be hemophilic? Yes, it's the same. 50% of the daughters would be hemophilic, 50% would be carriers. Among the sons, 50% would be hemophilic and 50% would be normal. Okay, so I hope that is very clear in your head now. And let me give you this homework question. Let's see if you have understood what we have done in today's session. It's slightly trickier compared to the examples that we solved, but if you have got all the basics right, all the logic right in your mind, you will certainly come up with the correct answer for this. No matter how much time you spend to solve this, once you have understood the logic of this, I'm sure you can solve any problem that comes. Okay, so look at this, observe this pedigree chart and answer these 3 questions. A couple has 5 children, like you see here. The following pedigree chart shows the inheritance of the trait color blindness in them. Answer the questions that follow. Okay? So, is the colorblind parent the mother or the father? Basically, you need to know the symbols very clearly to answer the first question. In the second question, how many children are born with color blindness? Looking at the pedigree chart, you would be able to come up with the answer. Thirdly, explain the case of the other children, which means after you have understood and after you have answered how many are color blind, you have to give a description of the case of the remaining children. Say for instance, if only one was colorblind, of course, here you would say only one is colorblind. And in the third question, you would say the other children, or 50% of them, among the other children, 50% are normal, 50% are carriers, or whatever it is supposed to be, after you have come up to a conclusion. Observe it closely. If required, work out the genotypic possibilities of each of these individuals and come up with the answer. If you think data is wrong or data is insufficient, do put that also as your comment. Anything is possible. All I want you to do is observe it carefully, apply the logic that you have understood and answer the question. Okay? So be very clear, children. It's slightly longer than our normal homework questions. Have a look at it. Okay? And with that, we come to the end of today's session. Do remember to download Vedantu's learning app. Do stay in touch through the Telegram group, the link of which is given below this video. And most importantly, if you have liked this video, if you have understood all of what we have discussed in today's session, and if you have enjoyed watching it, do remember to hit the like button right now. Do remember to share it with all your friends, whoever you think will benefit from this. And I think even NEET aspirants will find this session useful if at all you're following this, or if you have any friends, aspiring NEET friends studying in class 12 now, do share it with them also, or your CBSE friends. And remember to subscribe to our channel Vedantu 9th and 10th so that you don't miss out on any of the surprises that we have in store for you in the coming days and in the coming weeks. So we have come to the end of Mendel's experiments and sex-linked inheritance with the examples of hemophilia and color blindness. And with that, we have covered the good bulk or a good majority of your topics in the chapter genetics. If there is anything more that you would like to have a session on, I see that some of you are asking for a session on problem-based questions. Let's just check how many of you really want a session on that. Let's also look at how important it is for your exam, and we'll think about it. If there is anything more in this chapter that you want help with, do post it in the comment section below, or please remember to send me an email. Isha, I remember that you had said that you did not get my email ID. This is my email ID, ambika.gopalakrishnan@vedantu.com. It's a slightly long name, so please make sure you put the spelling correctly so that it reaches me and doesn't bounce back and come back to you. So in case you want to stay in touch with me through email, absolutely welcome. I will be replying whenever I find the time, or do post your comments or doubts in the comment section below. And I will see you again in another session very soon. Until then, happy studying, and this is Ambika signing off. Bye bye.